Welcome to Very Honored Frater BT's Esoterinerd podcast, episode 108, entitled Edward C. Reib. Now, for those of you who don't know me or aren't longtime listeners of the show, that's me. You know me as Very Honored Frater BT. I'm usually interviewing someone else, but see, what happened was, you probably read the description, but I'll go through it anyway, just in case you haven't. Very Honored Frater RC, who you know already, you should. If not, he's in a lot of episodes. I recommend those episodes, but we'll skip that for now. He runs a school. I mean, we'll skip the biography just because the episode's going to be really long anyway. And I think I've given his biography 2 or 3 times already. But he's an old friend, and he's an author. And if you search on Amazon for Frater RC, Frater space RC, you'll see all of his books. So he has a school as well. And I had the privilege of being a guest teacher yesterday. I don't know what day that was, but, it was yesterday. Anyway, so he recorded it, he sent it to me, and I edited it down because it's a private class, and there were a number of people there from different places, and they had questions. There's 1 or 2 points where you might hear a voice say something, but I did my best, to cut most of that out, not out of disrespect to anybody, but for privacy. So people can say, "Hey, that's my Jed's voice. He's doing some kind of occult thing." No, we'll edit that out. And so I just kind of kept in the pertinent parts. You'll notice it cuts to the intermission music from Monty Python every now and then. That's, the parts I cut out. Like, for example, the really big spoilers about Thomas and the Wolf. I hope this is in focus. If that doesn't make sense, I'm talking to the people on YouTube. You're still listening to the audio only version. Well, you're a busy person, I understand. Sometimes you got to listen to it during the morning jog or on the way to work. But just so you know, there is a YouTube channel. You can just go to YouTube right now and type in Esoterinerd, click 108, the 108 episode, and you'll be seeing me looking you in the eye right now, like a good New Age guru, the inappropriate, prolonged eye contact. Okay, I'm just kidding. So before we get to that, though, I'm supposed to say, but first, Transformations and Footnotes. I recorded that a long time ago. This is the segment in which I recite portions of my dad's book, which is now available on Amazon, Transformations, if that's not in focus, by John Dan Reib. If you just type in REIB on Amazon, you'll get all my books, and you'll get his book as well, Transformations. I highly recommend it. He wrote it in 1976. I started with chapter 1, verse 1, back in, Esoterinerd episode 12, I think, or something like that. And then, we've been revisiting it, and we're up to chapter 5. We left off with chapter 5, verse 9. So today I'm going to read Transformations chapter 5, verses 10 through 17. This is Transformations by John Dan Reib, chapter 5, verse 10. It works to go with the flow in the flesh place or any other place. You and I both know that we are going with the flow anyway, and that if we resist the flow, we get pulled along and maybe dashed against one of the agreements. Verse 11. The thing is, you and I, we're here, right? What works then? Verse 12. Failing to find what works, we find what doesn't work. In each case, we have what? Works. Verse 13. Get it? Works include what works and what doesn't work. Jesus said, "By their works shall ye know them." He was doing nothing more or less than directing traffic in the direction in which it was already going. Verse 14. So then, it works to do what works. The thing is that journeyers know that whatever happens, we remain alive. Flesh place fear junkies think that they have to do something about it to survive. That's the problem. Verse 15. Flesh place fear junkies, with all the best expectations, or even some nasty expectations, do negative things that work in programming negative results. Flesh place fear junkies come from needing to survive, so they opt for survival rather than getting that they are alive. Thus, they operate from the need to become better and fear of getting worse. They get stuck in getting worse a lot, even when they have agreement that whatever they've got is better. It's what it tastes like and feels like and is like that it's worthwhile to tell the truth about. Verse 16. When it's supposed to be sweet and isn't, that's when many flesh place fear junkies get curious and or nasty. Sometimes they pop out of their flesh tubes permanently for this time around, trying to prove that they are right and that it does taste sweet like the ads and everybody else they listen to and imitate says it should, when it really doesn't for them personally. Verse 17. Or flesh place fear junkies may be running a revolving life tape around something that feels sweet and doesn't produce sweetness for others. Then they boo-hoo about it and make it right and others who don't do it wrong, or make it wrong and justify it by making themselves right and getting agreement that they're right for other things they do, and by voting when they've already voted. You and I know this. We also know something else. It is important to warn the violence fetishists among the flesh place fear junkies to watch out for stereotypes. Graven images, they are sometimes called. No footnotes for today. And so, without further ado, it's not really an interview. Let's call it a lecture that I gave to very honored Frater RC's class, the Hermetic Mystery School. You can look that up. You can join it if you'd like. And so, without further ado, let's get to that lecture, shall we?
Hello, special guest. Welcome to our Hermetic Mystery School Sunday class day, Sunday School, Hermetic Mystery Sunday School. And this is Edward Reib. Welcome, Frater. You guys might have heard of him as Frater BT of the Esoterinerd podcast. And hey, Edward, some of us haven't shown up yet because we are doing this at a special time. Usually it's at 5, but it's at noon today because you're in India where you live. And I don't know if you'll get your video working or whatnot. Yeah.
Continue. And am I in?
You're in.
Am I here? Oh,
you're here.
Hello. If you don't mind, I'd love to know who's here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll get right into it. You guys. I don't want to bore you guys while I reminisce with with Frater here. So I'll jump right in. What's the time frame on this? Are we
Take your
scheduled?
time.
Okay.
We usually about an hour is good, but I'm sure lots of people have questions, but it would also be great to hear about what you've been up to, what you've published, why you've published it,
Sure.
your podcast, and how you're a bit of your journey. Your journey, of course, is intimately connected with mine in many ways, because we met in '97 at the Golden Dawn, but didn't get to know each other really till '98.
And your hair was down here.
Yes, it was. Thanks for reminding me of my greatest shame.
Oh, no. I won't waste any more time. Time is valuable. And thank you very much for inviting me to come on here. Thank you for coming and sharing your time with me and, giving it value and all of that. And I will do my best to, pass along something so you can say, hey, I'm glad I did that. So I'll get to my personal stuff, but I want to jump in with kind of the lecture, I guess, and feel free to ask questions if you have questions. So there's two things I want to read. Two parts of, I just realized it's 1 a.m. and I've got my landlord on the other side of the door there, so I should probably stop shouting. By the way, I'm in India, if you guys didn't know. I'm in Goa, India. Okay, so I wanted to read a little bit of, is that backwards?
No.
Are you seeing that backwards? Okay.
No.
So this is David Lynch. You might be familiar with some of his movies or his famous TV show, Twin Peaks. You might not be into David Lynch. That's okay. It's the content of what he's saying that I want to share, because it relates to the lecture, which is about U1, which is a Inner Order Golden Dawn document, part of it. Anyway, so I'm going to read this, and I'll tell you where it's from. This is from the introduction of David Lynch's Catching the Big Fish, Meditation, Consciousness, and Creativity. So I don't know if there was a title for this, but the title that I was thinking, it might sound kind of weird and esoteric, but it's U1, Inspiration, Imagination, and Tiferet, or Tiferet, as my Hebrew teacher would say. Okay, here we go. Introduction. Ideas are like fish. If you want to catch little fish, you can stay in the shallow water. But if you want to catch the big fish, you've got to go deeper. Down deep, the fish are more powerful and more pure. They're huge and abstract, and they're very beautiful. I look for a certain kind of fish that is important to me, one that can translate to cinema. But there are all kinds of fish swimming down there. There are fish for business, fish for sports. There are fish for everything. Anything that is a thing comes up from the deepest level. Modern physics calls that level the unified field. The more your consciousness, your awareness is expanded, the deeper you go toward this source, and the bigger fish you can catch. And he goes on to talk about how his personal practice was in TM, which was founded, just a few miles from here, over in Rishikesh, by Maharishi
Mahesh.
And it's there's a famous time when the Beatles went and hung out with Maharishi, and in the end, John Lennon and Ringo and Paul were all kind of not into the Maharishi's weird kind of inappropriate behavior. But George Harrison loved him. He just saw right through it, and he was like, it's his way. And so George Harrison supported him for the rest of his life. And with things like that, you run into that anywhere. You run into that in Golden Dawn, where you read 15 books by an author, and then you find out he's some kind of molesting creep, and it's always heartbreaking. But it happens if you get into Tibetan Buddhism with Shimalaya. It happens if you're into Catholicism. It happens if you're in Golden Dawn, and probably Thelema too. I don't know much about Thelema, so. So that's David Lynch, and again, he goes on to talk about TM, Transcendental Meditation. A path is a path is a path. If you're into Zen, then be into Zen. If you want to join a Zen monastery, join a Zen monastery. Otherwise, you can pick up Shobo Genzo. It's the original text. It's been translated into English, and I do recommend it. I was into Zen for a while. But anyway, my point is, the path is less important today, because we're on a, I assume you guys are, yeah, you're talking about getting into this stuff. I assume this stuff is magic, right? The occult, the Western mystery tradition, as it were. So I'll look at it primarily through that lens. But yeah, so inspiration, imagination, and creativity. One thing, so I'll start with inspiration, just briefly before I get into this. No, actually, I should get into that first. No, anyway, inspiration is from a root word that has to do with breath. Maybe Frater, you know more specifically. But anyway, it's the in breath, it's the inhale, it's the spirit. The spirit comes in. Veni Sanctus Spiritu is descend, Holy Spirit, come, Holy Spirit. Inspiration is that. Some people call it Holy Spirit, other people call it fourth, or whatever, or silence, or what have you. So then imagination in a tree of life context, we're talking about Tiferet. So the astral plane. If well, we're all coming from kind of a magical perspective, so I'm not gonna like do the disclaimer for people who are like ardent atheists and only believe in neurons firing and all that. We'll just skip that part. So imagination is above the astral plane in the sense, obviously, when I say above, I'm talking about the tree of life. I happen to have one right here. So the astral plane, as it's usually thought of and depicted in the movies, anyway, I won't get started on that, is here, like right there above Malkut. This is the place where all of the forces of the tree of life funnel down into what is called the Great One of the Night of Time. And Saturn is the ruling planet of this path. So it's all kind of being condensed into time. So if you notice when you have a dream, for instance, you wake up and you say, yeah, my brother was there. It was my old school. You didn't go very far. You're still kind of here. You're like right next to Malkut, but you're in Malkut because you left your body. But through varying practices and again, this is one path. I'm not saying this is dogma, this is the blueprint of the universe that God himself gave me. I'm not one of those guys. Some people will say that or imply that, but I'm not. I just mean to use it as a useful map. So Yesod and Netzach and Hod are what's called the astral triangle. So some people see that and then they assume, oh, that's where the astral is this whole general area up here. And it's sort of like yes and no. Usually not. Usually when we're talking about astral projection or, I felt it astrally, we're talking about below Yesod. And Yesod is kind of where we begin. So it's an interesting map because the entire infinite universe, or finite, whichever side of that fence you fall on, is here. I mean, in this diagram, is in Malkut. You could say the multiverse for those of you who are Marvel fans or who were into that before they got into it. That's all here, all of it. Even what's his name? Are you guys watching What If? The Watcher. The Watcher is like maybe right here at the bottom of the astral plane, just looking down at this big chunk of rock. So then there's us, and we're here. This is our head, and this is our groin, figuratively speaking, talking more about the soul. Strictly speaking, the soul usually refers to the ruach in Golden Dawn or Thelemic terminology. So the soul, this doesn't include this, but big but, the soul wouldn't exist without this. So it's like it's like if the soul were, say, me on your screen right now. That's a weird example. Then the electrical plug, it's plugged in, when we just take it for granted that it's plugged in. And that's our sort of our relationship with Kether. So everything spirit moves through, everything animates everything, physical, astral, and in every other way. what am I going on about, Frater? I'm not even going, I have no direction. I'm just like, which way is the way? Okay, no. I'm supposed to be getting somewhere with this.
I've always enjoyed how you talk about the tree of life, brother. I've always enjoyed it. I've been hearing you do it for a decade, and
burn the dog class, or
never a waste of time to hear an
no.
adept talk about the tree of life, in my opinion. Yeah.
So in old times, back in ancient Egypt, these were called the Ba and the Ka. So the Ba is the you that resembles you, kind of, and then the Ka is the real you, but it's the one that's been watching, observing, without any judgment whatsoever, behind everything this entire time. And so all the thinking and all the emotion and all of that stuff and all the memories, and then dying and forgetting things and mourning and then being born again and having to start over as a baby and then doing that 100,000 more times, that has all kind of gone on in front of the real you, which is the Ka. So a person who is preferential toward sort of an external form of religion may wish to view it as, I'm me and I'm talking to God, and God is all powerful and all knowing, and it's hubris and not to mention heresy for me to say otherwise. And so that's fine. You can relate to the oneness that way too. New Agers will say, I am, that's me, that's I am, the great I, that's me, and then the Christians get upset and they make YouTube videos about it back and forth. So you know what? Let me just get to the reading, and then we can have kind of a reference point for what the heck I'm talking about. But no, let me finish what I said first. So my point is, imagination is up here in Tiferet. And when we're growing up in the outer world, in the mundane existence, and as babies being indoctrinated into this big board cube, we're told that's just your imagination. And so imagination comes to be thought of like the word no, or the word bad, or the word, some other words that kids learn as being, oh, that's not a good word. Reality, real life, real world, that's good. I need to grow up and get in the real world and stop living in my head and stop imagining things. But for a creative person, that's, that's the opposite of what you want to do, right? Not to say that living in your head is healthy always, but to tap into that creative flow, to get more creative flow. If you have some creative flow, to open up to be able to receive more creative flow. And so that's the point of what I want to talk about. I just want to provide some tools for you to use for that, whether you are a painter, whether you are a computer programmer, whether you are HR, whatever it is. So to bring of not only life and goodness, but a divine character and nature to the word and to the concept of imagination. And it's linked with inspiration in the context of U1 from this book. You guys know that book, right? Do you have one? There's the little black one. The pages might be different, but you can find the same thing in there. So I'm going to read again, and I'm skipping a lot. So I do recommend reading this because I'd take up half the time if I read the U1 document. So I skipped a bunch where basically it talks about, okay, the tree of life is you, and you are the tree of life. Your right arm is Gibora, your left arm is Sed, and then it goes on and on and on and on and on. It talks about your fingers and your eyes and your nose and everything. So that's the part I skipped. The spiritual consciousness is a focus of the action of neshama. Neshama is basically you in the supernals. There's the greater neshama, which is the all three supernals, and there's the lesser neshama, which is related to Bina only. But when we talk about higher self, that's usually what we mean, though there are higher selves than that. The Hiya and the Yakida. I'm white. Yeah. It's beyond the veil. I have to keep it secret. No. Okay, so the lower willpower should control the descent of the spiritual consciousness into the Ruach, and thence into the Nefesh. The Nefesh in Golden Dawn terms is related to Yesod. It's the you and Yesod, your what they call animal nature. But in Golden Dawn circles, Nefesh tends to get a weird kind of like, especially coming from that sort of Puritan Victorian era, and some people kind of grasp onto that. We came from a temple where there was a lot more Catholicism than other Golden Dawn orders. And so the obscene ones were the klipoth of Yesod. And so the nefesh was, you're nefeshing, or don't think about that girl, you're nefeshing. But nefesh is a Hebrew word, which means soul. It also means tombstone. And basically, I don't know, I'll send you guys some PDFs if you're interested, but just to give you the short version. Back in the day when the church was barbecuing people for having original thoughts, there was a guy, probably, they called him Christian Rosenkreutz, but he's probably more than one guy. There was a phenomenon, more like, where people would travel and they would go outside of Europe and they would go into North Africa, which back then was like where civilization was. You could write, someone could give you a check in Spain, what's now called Spain, and you could cash it in Mecca and beyond. And that was going on 1,000 years ago. And then more like 700 years ago, some people started bringing mercantilism and banking across into Europe, and hence the stereotypes. But anyway, so anyway, there were a few monks. CRC is a notable one, and who or if he's a mythological character, I don't know. But the story goes that he went to Africa and he learned whatever the heck I'm talking about. Oh yeah, no, he learned about the Kabbalah, and he learned about elemental spirits. He learned from some of the pagan traditions, what the Christians call pagan, which is just non-Christian basically, and elemental spirits and this kind of thing. And then he went to Spain, which was still Al-Andalus. It was this isn't a history lesson. Okay, so he came back and he started teaching the Kabbalah secretly in whispered tones in the basements of monasteries, and then that got passed on for 100 years, and then they finally came out and posted the fama all over, like some cool like Occupy people. I don't know. That was a swift move, just like announcing their existence with a piece of paper, and then just who put those pieces of paper there? That's weird. So gosh, sorry. My brain sometimes jumps off the track and then I have to figure out what the heck I was talking about. So that's why nefesh, it means something different in the Golden Dawn than in what we might call kosher Kabbalah, traditional Jewish Kabbalah. So if you go to the Kabbalah Center, or if you read, there's plenty of books. There's a lot of interesting books. There's basically a one-way flow there, where Hermetic Kabbalists are really interested in reading the traditional Kabbalistic documents, and traditional Kabbalists are really not interested in what the Hermetic Kabbalists have to say with their weird, sticking Greek gods on the tree of life or whatever, and Jesus, not to mention. Okay, so I was reading. So that's nefesh. Neshama, ruach, nefesh. Okay. Superego, ego, it. I'm joking. This isn't the superego. Okay. For some it can be, for phone addicts. Okay. Where was I? The descent of the spiritual consciousness into the ruach and thence into the nefesh, for the consciousness must descend into the nefesh before the images of the sphere of sensation can be perceived. I'm going to stop reading and just explain it. But I'll tell you, this is 129 of the new book, and it's U1 document. It says the microcosm, man, and the magical mirror of the universe is the title of the section. So basically, inspiration comes from Keter. It comes from our true self. It comes from our silent, existent, eternal void, the only being in an abyss of darkness part of the self. And then it comes down into Tiferet, which is the heart of the soul. It's related to Osiris and Yeshua and things like that. But then it goes through a process before it goes down to Yesod. These other spheres kind of weigh in, and they all kind of say, oh, okay, so in order to do this, we'll need that. Oh, okay, we'll need to put some energy here. Oh, since we're not selfish bastards, we should, include these people. Like, so all the Sephirot have their say. They all kind of come together. And then in a perfect world, in a perfect situation, that inspiration came in and everything went out and blossomed just right, like a rose, And then the image of that rose comes down into Yesod and into the sphere of sensation. And then what's left, you pick up a pen and you write it down. You pick up a paintbrush and paint it. You do it. You do what the inspiration was. Now that's an ideal situation. It's not always an ideal situation, which is where David Lynch's advice about, transcendental meditation or, whatever works for you, path working in Golden Dawn or in Thelema, they do path working, right? Where you clear out the channels. Each of these is a tarot card. So you go into the tarot card and you meet the characters in the tarot card and you see if there's anything there that kind of shouldn't be, or if there's something to learn, something to glean, some insight. And these are very deep things. They're not just images. Like, for example, Hode is called Reason, I think by Paul Foster Case. This path is the path of judgment. Now, of course, as they say in the practice initiation, to the uninitiated eye, this looks like the book of Revelation, where the dead are rising from the graves, the book of, the judgment card. But it's not. It's fire. It's a glyph of the teachings, the esoteric teachings behind the nature of fire, and 4 different types of fire: solar fire, volcanic fire, and astral fire, and then the latent heat. And that process of the judgment card, just focusing on that one card only, each of them has a similar process that's unique to that card. But with judgment, going through it and clarifying what is the solar fire, what is the volcanic fire, and what is the astral fire in this situation, or in my life, or in my mind, or in my consciousness right now. And then the latent heat is you receiving the wisdom of these 3. So that process leads us to a place called reason, a place called the left brain. And then from that left brain, when you sit in Hode and you look at Malkuth, you are looking through the path of judgment. And that is what judgment is when Spock, Spock, am I using a dated reference? Should I use a more, oh no, they brought Spock back, didn't they, for Discovery? So if you're a Vulcan, he's half human, bad example. If you're Tuvok, then and you look at, what the humans are up to, it is not logical, it's, there's a lot to criticize, and so that's what it is to be kind of an intellectual in a state of judgment looking at the world. That's a place, that's not an error. It's not a way of life forever either, but there's a place where that happens, and it's Hode. And then you can kind of triangulate. You guys know about triangulation. Triangulation, I'll just briefly, the most fun example is when they put a radio satellite in Australia and another radio satellite in like Canada or Brazil, and they both look at the same part of the sky, and then suddenly, like with 2 eyes, you can see the 3D image, at the movie theater, or the one in front of you. The stars pop out. You see which ones are farther back and which ones are up in front. So through triangulation, like for example, looking at the world through the eyes of Vedic astrology, and then looking through Western astrology, you can start to see, wow, there's some very different things, but there's some things that are so similar, it's eerie, like what's the story here? And then you get back into, the Proto-Indo-Europeans that we know nothing about, and there must have been a common ancestor, not just to the languages, but to a lot of the ideas and the gods and even the astrology of it. It's kind of mind-blowing. So that far afield, no. Okay, so what they talk about in this document, the microcosm man and the magical mirror of the universe is that in the drunkard, the sphere of sensation is warbly. That instead of normal like it's supposed to be, it sort of rotates and spins and warbles. And so when the divine inspiration comes in, it's hopeless because this is shut down. This is like focusing on the wrong thing, and this is in another direction, and the idea is gone. We've probably all had that experience where you're at a bar one night and you're like, oh my God, I gotta write that down, and then the next morning you're like, I remember I wanted to write something down, but I have no idea what it was. Well, it could have been the next bestseller, So keep a pen and paper handy. That's another good tip. But or a phone, I guess. What I do is I just send an email with no address, and then it saves in drafts automatically. So I just write the idea down, close it, it's done. So that's when you're drunk. When you're asleep, it's another thing, and it's also not ideal. When you're awake, but you're on the freeway, and do you have freeways up there? You're on the highway, you're on the road. There's a bunch of people honking, and you're pissed off at the guy that just cut you off, and you just cut someone else off, and they're pissed off at you. And then divine inspiration comes. Also, not an ideal situation. If you're focused on this or that, not to say stop focusing on that thing. No, it's if there's a thing like a loss, a mourning period that you have got to go through before you can be creative again, then just go through it. It's okay. If there's some serious thing in the way that's a blockage, there's a lot of things that'll help with that, and one of them is path working and working these teachings and just kind of like reading it and then taking it with a grain of salt. That's an expression that means don't take it as dogma, but consider it. And then if you're working the system, then say, all right, when you're playing chess, the knight moves like this. You don't move the knight like that. That's the bishop. That's how the bishop works. And in Golden Dawn magic, same thing. It's this is where Yesod is, not up here. This is where Tzadi is, Mr. Crowley, not up here. So a little inside joke for the kids.
Our member who's a Thelemic person and just got initiated in the OTO is not here. So hopefully she'll appreciate your joke on the replay. Hopefully.
I find that 100% actually. I don't think I've met a Thelemite, a self-identifying Thelemite that didn't enjoy my perspective on things, even though I don't have the highest opinion of Crowley. I think that they don't either is the thing, that's the point, is it's founded by a guy who's not like someone you're supposed to kiss the ass of, like he told you not to, and you listened, Buddha and Jesus said the same thing, then nobody listened, Okay. I don't know. I thought that one part of chapter 3 of the law was a little rude, but anyway. Okay, so when we work our reason, sometimes reason, wants to be the boss. This is called the perfect path in the Sefer Yetzirah. It's the place where not only can you see the whole picture of everything, but it's also the point where God can see the whole picture of everything, and where you and God can coexist in a perfect space where everything makes perfect sense. So why would you go anywhere else, and why would you think that there's anywhere else to go or any higher to go? That's hope. So that's why the tower is the way out, because you have to take a sledgehammer and smash it to bits, and then you're left there naked and terrified, and then you realize that all that you are is a flower reaching for the sun that will only reach it in death, and then you can start to move forward. So the point is that when we work all of these, we get in touch with the father and the mother, and you can do that. You don't have to do it in a high magic, snotty kind of diagrams. This diagram right here that we all use, you know who drew this? We know his name, Athanasius Kircher, right? And he was a famous occultist. No, he was a Jesuit priest. He was a Catholic priest who this was when there was a period where the best place to be when you want to study this stuff is in the church, because then you can just be a Jesuit and say, oh, well, I'm learning it so that I can use it against the enemies of Christ. And then they don't barbecue you. So it's a neat trick. So it's cracking up here. so anyway, so when you work out, so what I'm saying is you can go to a Wiccan circle in the woods and sing to the Father and sing to the Mother. You can call on the spirit of primal water and the spirit of primal fire, and you can call them Gaia and Uranus, or you can call them whatever, you know. In this context, they're thought of as being two different names of the same one God because of the Anglicans who founded the Golden Dawn. So that's their spin. You know, if you've read the Chaldean oracles, it's very nice because it keeps going back and forth between oneness and multiplicity to such a degree that you stop seeing any difference. That, you know, like when people say one name for many gods or many names for one God, it's like, whatever, you know, like, you know, it's all kind of how you look at it. So yeah, in that context, this is Yod He Vav He Elohim, and this is Yah. Not to be confused with Jah. He was an Ethiopian, but same name, right? Anyway, we're not.
And the name also, that name in particular, Yah, came from the Assyrian Yah, like, you know, spelled E-A. That's where they got Yah, because it's pronounced Yah. And
for sure,
when I did,
and there's probably the difference between traditional Golden Dawn and Thelema is traditional Golden Dawn doesn't go any deeper than sort of that sort of Anglican Masonic understanding of the Bible, where in Thelema they'll kind of go deeper and underneath and around and upside down and say, okay, well, you say Lilith is a demon, I say that she's an ancient goddess, I'm going to invoke her tonight, you know, like, and in Golden Dawn they're like, what? What? The Queen of Demons? What? And so yeah, I don't know, I don't self-identify as being, I just happen to have spent 20 years in a Golden Dawn order, and then I quit. I never went into the personal stuff, and I'm not going to do it now. I will later, but yeah, for me, it's been 8 years since I left, and dove heavily into Buddhism and yoga, which eventually led me on a pilgrimage to India, where I met a beautiful Indian woman, and then we got married, and then now we live in Goa, and so I've gotten enough distance from my sort of not the greatest experience of a Golden Dawn order, that now I can kind of look back on the fond memories and smile and kind of joke about the shitty memories, you know. But there were a few solid years there where there was just not much but anger, and if somebody wanted to talk to me about Golden Dawn, I'd be like, no thanks, man, you know, I'm gonna just go do yoga, you know. So it was a long process, as cult survival is. But I can take the little gems I got along the way and share those without the horse shit that it came with.
You did yoga after the order. I joined a band. A lot of people have to do something intense
exactly.
to take
Fill
all that energy.
That space.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, so I'll just throw in though. So Edward, for a while, Edward and I are part of a very small handful of people, as he invokes the holy goddess of nature into his body right now. I'll share some details. Thank you. Okay.
It's a cobra.
It's a cobra.
Yeah, but you got it for me. My wife.
I love it. It's an entheogenic class. So we're part of a very small handful of people who have gotten to not just fulfill one major role in Golden Dawn temples and orders, but pretty much all of them. And Edward was around a lot longer than I did, and both of his parents also were magicians like mine. We were very similar. When I joined the order at 15, a year later I met him and his girlfriend at the time, and they were both 16. And it was you can imagine how amazing it was for me to be so young and then encounter all of a sudden there's two other kids there. One of the last nights that I'm in LA. And it's like, oh my God. And the next year I got to meet them more properly. We were all in practice by that point, though you, I think, were in Philosophus. And, you spent a long time in Philosopher's in Portal, I believe, while you were in a band and living the good life in Pasadena. But very few people have gotten to fill all the
My mom
roles.
died.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to go
Yeah.
there.
No,
But
it was a shitty time. My house caught on fire and my mom died.
yeah,
And
I
there was a lot of
remember.
drugs involved. There was fun involved, but mostly the drugs were self-medication.
Yeah. Your mom's death was very sad. I was very glad I got to meet her that first year when I
Yeah.
first met you
Oh,
because
that was the year I skipped. Yeah, I was. That was
yeah,
my 6 months off.
yeah.
They kicked my proctor out, and I thought it was unjust, and so I was sort of leaving in protest. And I said I don't want to leave as a practicus, so I got initiated into Philosopher's, and that was the last thing I went to for about 6 months. And then that was the Power Week that Poke Runyon came to.
Yes, it
And
was.
so he and my mom got to talk, and well, they knew each other back in the 70s, and my dad knew Pope Runyon. There was a bit of a falling out, so they had a bit of a reconciliation that I wasn't a part of, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it. And then years later, I got into it with Poke on Alt Magic. Nobody remembers news groups. Back before social media, there were these news groups. Oh, good. Yeah. And so Poke Runyon was there as Gnome de Plume. I don't know if he still uses that name, like Gnome, like a GNOM.
Sorry.
Alias name of feather. Anyway,
Pretty funny.
Yeah. And I was there as Gwydion back when nobody knew I was Gwydion, But then someone outed me. John Brawl, I think, outed me. And,
Oh yeah. Oh,
so,
John Brawl. I forgot him.
yeah.
Anyway.
So I was there defending what I now call the Procrustean Order of the Limited Value International trademark. That was the name of the order we were in. It was actually Hermetic Order of the Morning Star International, or HOMSI. That was at one point. Another time it was called.
I actually liked that name for the order.
Yeah,
we stayed Golden Dawn in Canada because we legally had registered as that, and we could. But in the States, you guys couldn't. But I like the Morning Star name. It's more similar to the Stella Mattstein. I just think it's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't really care. Most of us didn't care, but a lot of people did care about the name.
Yeah.
And they still do. They're still doing a legal battle, eh? They're still fighting with Griffin. Yeah.
So yeah. So did I? No. Yeah. Basically, does anybody have any questions about what did I say anything at all? I was mostly talking about like creating space for creativity. Creating space can mean deep meditation and silence and darkness, or with a candle, or whatever you prefer, or with the ocean in front of you, or whatever it is. Mostly setting aside 20 to 30 minutes minimum, or 10, or 5 even, to, put down the phone. That's step one. Like if that's the state, no judgment here. I'm an addict too. You can start with, okay, twice a day for 20 minutes, I'm turning off my phone, and then I'm going to try not to like look at it or reach for it. That's the world we live in now. Earlier today, I have this one phone that needs to see my face in order for the bank to. So I was at the ATM, and because I'm in India and because shady things happen here sometimes, my bank occasionally blocks my card. So there I am, right at the ATM. There's people waiting behind me. I've got my mask on because I'm using the ATM. You have to have your mask on. And so I've got my phone, and then I get a notification, and the thing says your card is blocked, and I'm like, okay. And so I've got like my wallet in one hand and my card in the other, and I've got my phone in the other, and I'm taking off my mask so that my bank app can recognize that it's me, so that I can unblock the card, so I can put the mask back on. What the hell is going on? It's such a weird world now. Okay, sorry. I hope I'm not bothering my
question about what you said before we open it up to general questions about anything, which is what we'll definitely do.
Oh, and I'll talk about my books a little too.
Yeah, please. A general question, because I did do a little module on pathworking for these guys, and it's up on the site, so they can all get into it at any point. Though I think most of them are taking me seriously when I hope so, folks. But when I constantly talk about the value of the tarot contemplation ritual, because really, in my experience, that exercise of deconstructing the card and being open to a message from that whiteness is the muscle building tool exercise that builds that muscle for every other exercise, especially pathworking, even invocation and scrying. Not to mention if you want to practice things like psychism or telepathy or any of that stuff, the tarot contemplation exercise is exactly the exercise that builds that muscle of open reception, so that you might actually get a transmission from the macrocosm, which is what you need if you want to find out what card is flipped upside down that you can't see with your physical eyes. You need to penetrate and rend that veil psychically through into the macrocosm. Otherwise, you're not going to see what the actual card is. You're just going to see your own sphere's reflection. So moving from tarot contemplation into path working, you're talking about the issues that arise when going through certain paths to different Sephiroth. And I was thinking, you said basically two things about being open to inspiration from the higher self, and the way we do that through openness to creativity and imagination, letting that flow through us. But also parallel with that, it seems like you're saying the operations, when you go into each of those tarot paths and bring and resolve the issues that arise in them, you create clarity of transmission so that divine light can flow down through us more clearly and more accurately. We can receive knowledge of our neshama,
of what the vision is.
Yeah, and it's an essential thing you're talking about.
Yeah, when David Lynch, they asked him, so do you come up with these ideas while you're meditating? And he says, no, that's not meditation. And he explains, meditation is how I allow myself to expand into the unified field, or the Akashic record, or whatever you want to call it, the collective consciousness, the collective unconscious. That in silence, by letting go of the finite things, that we allow us to willingly and unwillingly, unknowingly identify us or anchor us here in this world. I always, when I would do, maybe you do this too, but especially if we're going to do path working, I always involve the symbolism of the altar of burnt offering and the laver of brass, which is from the Old Testament and from our Zelator practice in the Golden Dawn, and using it in a specific way. That the altar burnt offering, in this exercise, I always explain that if you throw something in, that doesn't mean you're like intending to destroy it. It's not like you're saying, if you have like your mother's doll or something you cannot let go of, you just have to make sure that wherever you go in your whole life, you got to make sure that it's there. In this visualization, you would throw it in the fire. And it doesn't mean that you're going to like curse it to fall on the ground or that you hate your mother. It just means that that's the shape of the key that unlocks the door out of here. is you take all the stuff that you just can't live without and you put it in the fire, and then you take one more step and then you're out. And it's as easy as taking a deep breath and closing your eyes. And you can do it anytime. You can do it right now. You can do it with a lot of complex, interesting things to focus on, which is a useful thing for a certain type of mind. Or you can do it without that. I think my explanation about judgment is a good example. We could go into other examples of how these cards are, they're very deep and useful. Abstract archetypes, abstract enough to really tap into our own. It's a kind of self-hypnosis language. The LBRP have done well. I know in the OTO they teach you to say, okay, Ate Malkuth Vigabura Redun, but if you intone it like a deacon, in some kind of like Russian Orthodox, you just like really get into it and embody Ta Malkuth, let alone the rest of it. You get yourself into a very nice alternate state of consciousness without drugs, without need for anything. The drugs are all produced in here and a few other places. And these are all tools. The robes and all that are tools to unlock those things within ourselves. Shoot, I did it again. I lost my train of thought.
If anyone couldn't tell, he is actually, in fact, a Vulcan, literally, because you're as my mom would say, Vulcan rules your sun sign. Though traditionally it was Mercury, but she would say now it should be Vulcan.
I'm glad you're enjoying that. That's the pathworking specifically. I recommend episode 77 if you're at all interested in Buddhism, even a little. It's worth a listen. It's about 3 hours, but there's a lot of music. I made volume 8 of Suryangama Sutra into a little bit of a funny, whimsical musical number. I mean, I don't sing, but there's you know, like things like Depeche Mode and then like Tibetan bells and you know, but it's
Nice.
related. And there's always a demon and the theme from what was that? Curb Your Enthusiasm. Dun, 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 bum, bum, bum. That happens whenever the demon possesses like one of these idiots that think they're a guru because they had one or two experiences, and then the demon like uses them as a puppet to run around and start you know, shady cults and lead everybody astray. It's really cool. It goes through 10 different examples of how that can go, and 10 different types of demons that possess people who think that they're gurus and what types of cults they make. It's really neat. So I recommend that one.
Volcanic fire. Quick little thing while he gets back in. Yeah, and so the three kinds of fire are also called Od, Ob, and Or in Hebrew. And it's some very interesting texts, actually. I was just looking at some notes I made when I was actually staying with Edward in LA. Probably these are some notes I made from about 2002, Edward, on the perpetual intelligence, which of course is one of the paths that you were talking about in the 3 = 8 initiation. So it's cool. I just found these notes here on that I wrote, like, you know, while we were
How cool.
still doing some stuff. Yeah.
So okay.
The question was on, can you say more about
yes.
the volcanic fire?
Volcanic fire. Good question. Good question. Yeah, I went through all that very quickly. Now, one thing I'll say is in traditional 130 years ago, you would have had to wait, young man, to find out about volcanic fire, because really you ought to be a master of the first 3 grades. And then you go through the initiation and you learn from the gods themselves in a trippy ass temple setting in a sing-song voice. That's when you learn about the volcanic fire. So when people complain about people breaking their oath of secrecy, it's basically because they're denying you the opportunity to have the same experience that W.B. Yeats had when he learned about the volcanic fire. Oh, well. So here it is. I'm going to deny you that experience. The volcanic fire relates to the left figure on the judgment card, which they can call Pluto or Typhon or whatever. It doesn't matter. He's the destructive fire. Now, keep in mind that he comes from the creative fire. The solar fire creates the other two, the astral fire and the volcanic fire, and all things in the universe, all things in the multiverse continually pour out of the solar fire and are born in swarms through the vast abysses of the universe. And so the volcanic fire is the one that destroys things. So occasionally, you know, you get a rock, it grows a little bit of mold, and after a few millennia, you've got metropolises and stuff like that. And then the volcanic fire comes along and goes, and people get scared and go, oh no, it's the end of the world. So that's volcanic fire. It's also our own death, and it's the destruction of things that we thought were going to last longer, but then they're gone all of a sudden, whether they be ideas or people or does that answer your question? It's not exactly the Grim Reaper. Yeah, it unties atoms like shoelaces. It's the destroyer, but it's not like a bad guy. You know, I mean, it's sort of like Shiva or something. Yeah, and then the question for you David Lynch fans, what are we leaving out? The uncle is the astral fire. That was a weird reference. I'm sorry. Which is the right basal angle, the lower right angle. There's the 2 women, Persephone and Hades, or whatever you want to call them, Nephthys and Isis. And that's the astral fire, which is also comes from that solar fires issued as she explains. The soul, being a brilliant fire, by the power of the Father remaineth immortal. So the astral fire is basically what we call, you know, kind of us. It's the soul. It's the weird light moving around in the universe that kind of like animates things in strange and interesting ways. And it's us. So then the process of the judgment card separates out, okay, what is this, you know, the source of it all? Okay, connect with that. All right, now if the great destroyer came along right now, what all would that destroy? All right. And then I try to simulate that experience with the altar burnt offerings and say, throw your mom's old doll in the fire and let it go. It's kind of like that, but with everything. And then all that's left when you go through all that's left is the astral fire, and it's you. And then you can move into Hode. So sometimes people will do the judgment card, and they're like, "Yeah, I saw the character on the right, and I talked to him, and he said, 'Hey, howdy,' and then I kept going. I don't know why I'm doing it. Again, my dad came from Texas. Okay, so then they go into Hode, and they're like, "Yeah, I was in Hode. It was nice. I think I'm going to change the furniture," but like they didn't actually go through the process to get there. And when they're visualizing their temple in Hode, they're not experiencing the nature of Hode. So the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. And sometimes that includes incense and oils and mood lighting and music. The more you plan for the experience, then the more you can kind of glean from it, and then you get more interesting poetry in your magical journal afterward. So were there any other questions before I move on? So I'm going to tell you a short story. I won't give away the whole. I'll tell you kind of the main twist, but there are other twists. Okay, so this isn't a book I wrote. My dad wrote this. It's called Transformations in 1976. Poke Runyon, you know Poke Runyon? I mentioned him earlier. He gave my dad's book a really good review, because they were friends back in the day. So what happened was I was trying to quit smoking, right? This was a few months ago here in Goa. And at the time we were staying in this flat. They call them flats here because of British time period. Anyway, and we were staying in this apartment and there wasn't a lot of space. So when we were quitting smoking, sometimes we would get irritable and it didn't go well with quitting smoking. So what we would do was we would get a hotel or we would get a space somewhere, and then one of us would go there, one of us would stay back there. And then after a while, when we felt like it, we'd switch. And then we'd go through the withdrawals. And if we're alone and grouchy, who cares? If we're together and grouchy, then that's not so good. So there you have the reason why I was alone in this shack by the beach, by myself for several days. And I was also, trying to fast from my phone too. I brought my Buddhism books. I brought this Nyingma monk's robe well, it's a long story. In Shobogenzo, it talks a lot about the Buddha's robe and the monk's robe and what it means, and it's sort of a magical symbol from a certain point of view. Not to say that there's magic in Zen, but not to say that there's not magic in Zen. It's sort of mu. Mu is the answer to that one, which means it's a dumb question. Okay, so rewind. So there I was. Is going to read this book, and he's going to get to read his own words from his former life in the red letter text. And so that's the subtext behind why I wrote the book. But I think people will enjoy the book because it's a nice tale of two very different people coming to find some kind of mutual understanding. And though they may not agree, they don't hate each other. And the very last page is here, I'll just read you the last paragraph. So total spoiler, the very last page of Thomas and the Wolf. Fun stuff. Why not make it fiction? Because when it's fiction, it's like, in Lord of Illusions, they had the real magician pretending to be a fake magician, because if it's stage magic, you can levitate, you can fly, you can turn things into other things, and everybody just thinks you're just a brilliant stage magician.
That's a great film. If anyone hasn't seen it, it's a little
really
horror. It's borderline horror, really.
Yeah,
that matters to you, one
and
way or the other.
That the cult leader, is very much reminiscent of our old cult leader.
Well, yeah, the guy
has the same voice and sort of the same face and everything, same words too.
There's there's a similarity I've noticed amongst these sort of people who run big orders or big magical groups. I mean, even Maharishi, right? Like you said, they have different ways of doing the same thing, but they all often have these similar qualities. Like like
Mm.
the guy who started our order is very similar to Griffin and the people who start other orders, and even the Ciceros,
Yeah.
used to own a strip club, and Rigardi would come and the strippers would get
Yeah,
him to sign their
that's
copy of
true.
the Golden
My
Dawn
old
thing.
friend Gordon described him as being mafia-like, you know,
Yeah, so
when he met him. Yeah, and even in churches and big churches, the
yeah.
big crystal cathedrals that rake in the millions of dollars from the old ladies on TV and everything, similar. And one thing they all have in common in the Western world, in the Judeo-Christian egregore, is they always talk about how God chose David not because he was perfect, but because he was, I don't know what, I forget the rest of that sentence. But yeah, there's always a comparison with King David and how King David had one of his most loyal generals killed because he had gotten the general's wife pregnant and then got, all these like terrible things. And so when people talk about the cult leader or the priest, then they say, well, it's all fine and dandy for you to stand there in judgment, but Jesus said, "Judge not, lest you be judged." And do not forget, King David was also a total fucking asshole megalomaniac who murdered people and had sex with women inappropriately, just like father, and
Yeah.
that's you find that everywhere, I guess, some form of that.
I
But
watched the
yes.
documentary on the Source family recently, and I didn't
Oh
know about
yeah,
them.
I
The
had an
Source,
influence on that. I
yeah,
had one little thing,
I
one little thing.
recognized one of the guys from your
No, no, no.
podcast.
Well, yeah. I interviewed a lot of them, but no. What happened when they were making that documentary was they were saying that all that stuff they did Yod He Vav He and all this stuff, and that they learned it from Crowley. Crowley taught all that. Crowley was the source of that. I'm like, no, Crowley was not the source. It was Golden Dawn. It was the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn in 1888. Crowley got all of his stuff from there. And by the way, the stuff that Father Yod was doing came from Paul Foster Case, and he didn't even like Crowley. Paul Foster Case was a good friend of Moya Mathers, so it'd be much more appropriate for you to say Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And so there's that one part of the Source Family documentary where they talk about how Father Yod was into sex magic and tantra and all this other stuff that he learned from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And so then there was all this controversy and Nick Farrell writing blog posts and all this stuff about how there's no sex magic in the Golden Dawn, all because of a miscommunication between me and Isis Aquarium.
Oh wow. Wow.
Yeah, sorry about that. All of
Yeah.
Golden Dawn egregore.
But I brought the Source family up, and you guys should all see that documentary. It's a fascinating thing. Even I was thrilled to see that Bud. I think he's a Canadian actor. He did a Canadian Prairies movie that I saw that was really rough. I think it was a version like of The Stone Angel, that horrible book they make us all read in Canada. Peter knows what I'm talking about, hopefully. Or Kelsey. Margaret Atwood, yeah. Stone Angel. Oh my God, who has seen The Wind? All that stuff. It's like we don't. How many stories do we need about life as a young boy on the Canadian prairies? I don't know, but we've written way too many of them in Canada.
Amen.
But the actor from that, Bud, oh, what's his name? Bud something. He was also in one of my favorite movies ever, Harold and Maude. He actually spent some time with the Source family too. A lot of really interesting characters and artists spent time with the Source family, and their leader has also filled this sort of similar role. He had been sort of a mafia type character when he was younger, and then evolved into this wizard
I have a funny story
with
about
all
that.
these wives, of course.
The Bud, I'm trying to remember his name too, because I actually ended up knowing him personally.
Oh, no way. That actor?
Yeah,
What an
but
interesting guy.
I'm
He played
totally
God
gonna.
in Dogma. In Dogma, he was the guy in the hospital
And
that God disabled before
he was
God
in that Bill Murray
broke him.
movie too,
Yeah.
the Aqua Life or whatever. But yeah, so the guy who played the guy who played Harold, the guy who played Harold in Harold and Maude.
You're talking about the
for a
transgender
little while
remake you're going to make when he
for a little
plays
while he was
Maude.
in the Source family. I'll just tell you this much of the story. Okay, so there I was working at the Screen Actors Guild because unbeknownst to me, my higher self thought it would be funny to watch Hollywood crumble as a result of online piracy, YouTube, and Netflix from the inside. And so I did. And meanwhile, they were making this Source documentary. And so Gin Aquarian called. And I said, theatrical contracts, how may I help you? And he said, hi, my name is Gin Aquarian. and I want to file a complaint because Isis Aquarian is making this documentary and she's using my music. And I disagree with the position she's taking about a lot of things. On the focus of the documentary, I think it should be more about this. And they're focusing on that. And I said, I agree. And he was like, what? You know what I'm talking about? And I said, I just got off the phone with Isis. Actually, she's on her way here. She's going to be here in a half an hour. I run the LA Sanctuary of the Golden Dawn here. So she's on her way. She's in from Hawaii and she's going to come over tonight. Zarathustra introduced me to her. But anyway, I agree with you that she's focusing on the wrong stuff. And I think that you should be heard, you know, and unfortunately, it's not a SAG film. So there's nothing that we can do from our end. But here's what I think you should do. I'm going to give you the number of a good entertainment lawyer, you know, and so it went on like that. And then I said, by the way, you guys are really lucky. And he said, why? And I said, because you got the cool names. You've got Ma'at, you've got Isis, Mercury, you've got, you know, Electron, you've got, you know, Jinn. And I shouldn't say that too loud here. That's a bad word.
Their last names were all Aquarian, right?
It means the same thing, but it's here, instead of it being the Robin Williams character in Aladdin, it's like demons they're actually afraid of. So when you say Jinn, people go, don't say that. They you know, it's interesting. But anyway, so I have to be quiet. Sorry, brother, you were saying.
Oh, and all their last names would be Aquarian.
Yeah. They changed the name to Aquarian.
If you were going to join a cult, I'd say that would have been a fun one to join.
Yeah, well, that was one stage they went through. When they joined, they just became a waiter at a vegetarian restaurant on Sunset.
The neophyte grade was working at their restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. And then you get to go to the house and so on. And so I told Jin that he was lucky because in the cults, this type of cult, in the early days, you get the cool names. But in the Golden Dawn, after 130 years, you get like something that's Latin for he who gazeth at the mantle of the Lord upon which the lantern. And he's like, would you like me to give you a name in the Source family? And I said, hell yeah, you know. So he said, give me your email address. And I did. And he said, give me some time. And then a half hour later, he wrote me and said, congratulations, you are Pymander the Aquarian.
I didn't realize that name was gifted to you, brother.
Yes, it was divined by the guitarist of the band of the cult. So,
very appropriate name too, Pymander.
So I started talking about neo-Aquarians, and then but the problem is there were two types of cult survivor from that one. There were the ones that still kept the name they were given and named their daughter that, you know, and then there were the other kind that were like, oh God, what was I thinking? That man got into my head. It was his voice and his charisma. God, he's some kind of crazy man. And not to mention he was a criminal. And he was. He robbed a few banks. ISIS, I told ISIS, I said something to ISIS that it was a bank robber. And that his spiritual philosophy was a bank robber's spiritual philosophy. And she's like, he was not a bank robber. And I said, he robbed 6 banks. And she's like, he robbed a few banks. But he was much more than a bank robber, you know. And so, but that was how he started the restaurant and the cult and everything. Was he robbed 6 banks? He was a killer. He had murdered 2 people in cold blood, and prior to that, he was a Marine, and obviously during like World War II. So plenty of murder going on there. So he was so, but his whole thing was, you know, you should know that I'm a murderer. I'm not, you know, like that, you know, and but he went by Yahuwah. So he's the angry, jealous God. And that we all need to become Yeshua, but his name was Yahuwah. So it was like a self-aware, meta-ironic demiurge reference. So he was the cult leader ironically, but he acted like a regular cult leader. So it's why is it ironic? I don't understand. But anyway, it was good. The best thing about it was he died. I mean, I don't mean to say that someone dying is a good thing, even whoever. He wasn't a terrible person, but he died before things went weird. I mean, it was weird from the beginning, but he died after 5 years, you know. So the cult was going strong, 120 solid members and all kinds of events and things. And then the leader died. So at that point, there were the people who drifted over here and kind of kept playing and kept talking and kept doing the thing, like Jin Aquarian he's still in the cult in his mind. And then there were the people that were like, I don't want to talk about those days. My name is Benjamin Johnson, you know, like I don't want to talk about Enoch the Aquarian. Actually, Enoch the Aquarian is one of the people that is still into it, but he goes by Joseph Christie. Was there a question?
Oh, I don't know, but I was gonna say the way that their leader died is quite remarkable. Like honestly,
Hang
it's the
gliding.
only it's
Well,
the
first he
only
was like, gave a speech. He's like,
he knew
well,
he
I'm
was
gonna
gonna
die
die.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm gonna die now, but first,
yeah. Let me
and he
tell
was
you.
right.
Yeah. And then he said, yeah, they were supposed to watch over the body for 8 days, so they all got arrested in Hawaii. So there's like these great like mug shots of the Aquarians that were loyal to the end. Oh, how nice.
Yeah,
I,
he knew he
I
was
sent
gonna
that to
die.
Isis. I'm like, I know there must be a story behind this, and she told
Yeah, and you get to see the footage of him going up to the cliff before when he tells his
me.
followers he's gonna die now today, and he's like, "But first, I need to hang glide." He never hang glided before. He's old, big beard, gets on a hang glide up a cliff, goes off. They all think he's gonna crash and die, and that's what he meant about time to die. He hang glides
Right.
beautifully down onto the beach. They all run and meet him. He's okay, and he's like, "It's time," and he dies.
Mm. There was a
And it was so
beautiful he.
powerful actually because it's like that's the
It
only
was.
cult leader death
Mm,
I've actually heard that sort of
mm.
elevated the leader in
Another
my
one
mind.
was when one of the, you probably remember from the documentary, one of the sisters in the cult had a baby and it was stillborn. And everybody was crying, like, oh
Oh
God,
God,
oh
yeah.
no. And Father Yod walked in and he picked up the baby and he kneeled down and prayed. And then he breathed into the baby's mouth and the baby woke up and started crying. And he handed a little slip of paper to the mother and said, that's his name. And she opened it up and it said Solomon. Like, and it was on film. They were filming it and everybody was there. I think they were all naked. It was like
Yeah.
really wild,
Oh yeah.
really wild. uh Jesus.
Yeah. And they were sort of based in Pasadena near where you grew up,
Yeah, they were in
right?
Hollywood Hills.
Okay, yeah.
uh
Because you're
so
from Jack Parsons' neighborhood.
yeah, basically not
Yeah.
far from where that was. Yeah, the Agape Oasis back then. I want to show the other two books real quick.
Yeah. So Edward got into you sent me a message one day and he said thanks for pushing me to publish, and I was like, what do you mean? And I looked and he had banged out all these books that because he's been writing for forever, and I'm so glad you did, brother. I'm so glad.
It's a copy paste, I mean, it's like these books were already written and, arranging a few things and maybe a little proofreading, okay. So after this small, I published Thomas on the Wolf, and on the back it says Edward Reeb has written a bunch of short stories, right? So then I published my dad's book because, I kind of was planning to do that after this. And I kind of marketed it as a sequel because now that you've read Thomas on the Wolf, you might want to know a little bit more about who this Samuel character was, because Samuel was based on John Dan Reeb. Here's John Dan Reeb's book, blah. Then I decided, since nobody's going to wonder, but if somebody wondered, like, well, where are these short stories, so I took 31 of the ones that survived. I know I've written a lot more than that, but I don't have them. They're on old computers and hard drives that don't work anymore, unfortunate things. The printouts, I don't have anymore. So I took the 31 I had, and I took a painting that I did that was also, I did this painting on LSD in 1998. See?
Wow.
And
Love it, dude.
oh yeah, and so I made it the cover of this, and I took
Beautiful.
31 stories, and I arranged them in a way that has a nice flow and an arc, but the stories obviously aren't connected. So some of them are connected, though. There's a surprise thread where 2/3 of the way you realize that you are that there's a thread, and you're actually halfway through it, and you didn't realize it. So I do recommend it. If you there's the Kindle version. It's $2 or $3. I don't know. But then if you want the paperback's available. I think it's 12. Thomas and the Wolf is 12. And my dad's book, I made 8. I don't want to make money off it. I just want people to buy it.
Very cool. Very cool.
And then the last one that I have so far in my hand is Taco, which is much thicker. And it's, if you're into poetry, well, this is poetry. This
Sean's
is from
smiling right now.
1999 to 2017, which covers many of the order years too. And I don't directly talk about order stuff, but sometimes if you know what I'm talking about, then you'll know what I'm talking about. Like there's one point where I talk about how I had come to see the universe in terms of 7 walls, each having 40 squares. And it's like, if you know about the vault. You're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So it's a commentary about that and how it's like calculus trying to estimate a circle. It doesn't actually capture the circle. It just sort of tells you at what point it intersects with a specific kind of grid, hence the Procrustean order of the limited value. Procrustes was a man from mythology who, he had a bed you could use, but if you were too short, you had to be stretched. If you were too tall, something had to be cut off. And so it's my criticism of Golden Dawn as a way for everyone. I mean, obviously some people like it. It's for some people, they fit the bed. They get to Procrustes' house. They say, oh, it's a perfect fit. Thanks. And they have a nice sleep and they leave the next morning. And but then other people, if they think they have to fit for their loved one or their spouse or their mother, or their, sometimes it's not for everyone. It doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit. You get to the philosophist grade and someone's screaming at you some kind of crazy Old Testament fire and brimstone about how evil the Edomites are. And you're like, you know what? I'm out. I actually left that kind of church a long time ago and I don't need a new one, And that happens. Yeah, that's why I call it the progressive order of limited value. But it's like with affection. I do also love it, but I'm going to say what I have to say about it. And so anyway, Taco. I'm going to read one poem. Is it okay?
Please do.
We'll just end with one poem, or we don't have to end. By the way, there's one more book. It's called Sonnet 1. It's a computer program that I wrote. The program writes poetry, and if you know about Tron, then you know that if I wrote a program in an old 80s computer language that writes poetry, then that implies that in the grid, this face wearing some kind of blue light is in there reciting poetry like he thinks he's Shakespeare. So of course I dressed up and did that. Yeah. So check that out. Actually, all you have to do is know my name and Google it. If you go to edward-reeb.com, it's all there. Just click author. And all the 5 books that are available there, and the 3 books that I'm writing right now are down at the bottom of the author page. I just added that yesterday. There's E-Burrito, there's the Esoterinerd, and there's one other one, the New World Empire and the Interdimensional Coffee House. But I also have another one, Dan C. Reeb, about my paternal grandfather. Okay, I'm going to read. This might be useful to some of you one day, and it might be useful to one of you today. Because when one becomes a Rosicrucian, one takes, there's 5 things that make you a Rosicrucian. One is that at some point in your life, you have a student that is so damn serious that you basically are taking your lineage and giving it to them. They are your replacement in the order. That's one. Then another one is that you are a healer and you don't charge for it. So sometimes that conflicts with a lot of the new age stuff that's popular these days, where they charge for healing, and in the Golden Dawn, they ended up charging for teaching how to be a healer. So it was sort of a loophole, like it's not charging for healing,
I sometimes joke, Edward, that that magicians or GD people or occultists, Rosicrucian occultists at least, it's sort of, you could almost say that actually we can charge for anything but healing. Rather than saying we can't charge for healing, we can charge for anything but healing.
Oh, but no, that's you could say, doing a good tarot reading is a kind of healing. So charging for tarot readings means you're not a Rosicrucian. No. But then one of those 5 things was whatever the hell I was talking about. Do you know where I was going with that, Frater? Yeah. Oh yeah, you have to build temples. You have to go forth and build temples, and so when you're in a Golden Dawn order that's run by some kind of megalomaniac who's like an advertising specialist, if that happens, then you might find yourself like brainwashed in a certain specific way to where you feel guilty for not building more temples. It's a weird place to be. So, but if you're ever in a place at all like that, then maybe this one's for you, or maybe this can apply to you, even not relating to any of that. Oh, the last 2 things. What are they, Frater? Do you remember? You're supposed to have it's the RC is your mark, your seal, and your character.
Yeah,
that's very general.
And that you will meet on day C.
Day C. Which they interpret as Corpus Christi, but some people think it might be Christmas.
And also wear the clothes of the land.
Right.
Yeah.
That you're not
We
supposed to
blend
dress
in.
like a weirdo, you know. Not supposed. You're supposed to dress like the people of the land, not like with a yarmulke.
Yeah, fit
Yeah,
in.
I mean, unless they wear yarmulkes. If you go somewhere where they wear yarmulkes, put a yarmulke on. You know, like, if
There's
you're a
a-
Rosicrucian.
In the Golden Dawn, the path of the adept is referred to as the Hodos Chameleonis, or as Yeats wrote it, Hodos Chameleontes, and it means the path of the chameleon, which does refer to the once you enter into the solar initiation into Tiferet, into the center of the tree of life, it means that's the stage at which you have access to the entire tree, all the colored paths and all the colored sephiroth. So you are on the path, the lifelong path of the chameleon.
Beautiful.
Unless you get drunk. Yeah.
Yeah. Then you
So
get
I'm
a
gonna
timeout.
Yeah. So, okay, so this was originally written to someone who was feeling bad for not building more temples, I guess, or something. So here it goes. Building it is one thing. Healing it is another. Living it may include building and healing, but it is something else entirely. Don't beat yourself up for not building enough. Love and build what you can when the opportunity presents itself. Look for ways building may do good. Be creative. But if all you're doing is building and or beating yourself up for not building enough, what are you living? When you wake in the morning, take a deep breath. Ask love what you should do first. When you're done with that, ask her what to do next. I guarantee if you ask her who she wants you to be, she'll say exactly who you are. Live for God, life, and the universe, not fear of failure and unrealistic expectations of yourself.
Beautiful.
There's the poem. Yeah, well, thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. It's getting pretty darn late over here in India. For you guys, it's what, 1:30? Or some of you are in Texas? Or Brazil? What time is it in Brazil?
3:30 here in Texas.
1:30 for me p.m. So thank you very much for staying
Absolutely.
up so late.
Certainly.
Is your book Burrito out?
A burrito, e-burrito, I'm currently writing.
The next one's e-burrito. So taco and then e-burrito.
E-burrito is next. And that one, taco ends. Okay, so I one day I was like, fuck it. So I left the Golden Dawn, quit my job, got divorced, sold my house, and left the country. all at once. No. I did it over the course of about a year. And then there I was in Nepal. And at first, these guys that spoke English very well came up and they were like, oh my gosh, oh, it's Karma. Karma brought us together. You can help us pay for our children's tuition. And I was like, yeah, okay, I guess, you know, and then so a couple weeks later, I'm like, you know, like people just look at me and they see dollar signs. Like I came there to like leave it all behind. I was thinking I'd never use a cell phone again, never use air conditioning again. I was just going to go to a mountaintop or go into a cave. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I found myself on a rooftop in a rooftop restaurant having cappuccino. Do you want to hear that poem? It's the last poem of the book.
I do.
And it's where it leaves off. Okay.
Oh, good.
All right. So it's called Mixed. December 20th, 2017. Mixed. Beautiful temples, armless beggars. A new friend who leaves in 1 hour. Forgetting who I am, remembering who I was. Avoiding other tourists, then embracing them. Cappuccino on a rooftop where the locals won't bother me. Becoming someone my teenage self would despise. A Hinayana yogi bragging about charity. A deep look in the mirror, revealing I am white. And that's the note it ends on. So E-Burrito is like, well, what happened after that? Okay, there's 5 years of poetry after that. because I'm going to publish it in 2022. And eBurrito also includes poetry going back to 1992. So it's actually going to be with Taco and eBurrito together will be a complete 30 years of poetry. But Taco is definitely a good place to start. eBurrito, I think, will be smaller than this. And oh, by the way, if you're interested, I mentioned that I worked for Hollywood machinery during the 10 years that Hollywood kind of fell apart. I mean, it's still limping along in some form, but it basically went from, don't worry, the internet's just a fad. Back when people like flip phones, remember flip phones? And it was like, oh, it's in color. What? Jeep has a TV station on the phone? That's weird. Oh, Axe brand has a TV station on the phone? That's weird. And then smartphones came out, and then the rest is history. And Hollywood sort of, tower carded. And I got to watch it from the inside, and I wrote haikus every day. So most of this book is haikus about Hollywood slowly crumbling. But very specifically, it talks a lot of shit about Tom Hanks and what's the guy with the chin? You remember the guy with the big chin? Jay Leno. And this particular writer for the Daily Variety named Dave McNary. I guess I found myself on opposite sides of most issues with him, so I made him kind of the butt of many jokes. And they're not actually technically haiku; they're senryu. Haiku are 575 and about nature or something deep, and senryu are 575 and they're about humans, and they're cynical and sort of sarcastic and humorous. So they are senryu. They are definitely senryu. So I call it Entertunion senryu because it's from the point of view of Screen Actors Guild, which is an entertainment industry union for the actors. Blah, 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 talking. So Taco, it's called Taco, sorry. Taco, again, if you just search for my name, you can click on author. You can also click on movies and have a good time for many hours. And you can click on podcasts and have a good time for many more hours than that. And click on yoga and you can have a fun little read there. And yeah, thank you.
Before we let you go, thank you very much for being here, Frater.
Certainly. Thank you for having me.
Before you go, maybe I thought it would be an interesting thing just to, I want to tell people in context, because without you here, there's no context. So Edward's a very big reason why I started doing what I'm doing. In 2015, I got a notification on Facebook that he was live. And I looked at it. I was had just finished a show with my bandmates, and I was sitting outside. We're under the moonlight on our outdoor leather sofa, as one does in a band. And I saw him doing a second order ritual live streamed on Facebook and publicly. And I was like, holy shit, he's doing a in order ritual live stream. So we got in touch. We talked for several hours that night, and we hadn't really talked in over 10 years. I'd called him once in LA when I was there on a business convention, and but he apparently was out and drunk, and it was a short phone call.
Just briefly, I at one point the creepy cult leader decided he wanted to fade into the background because he had been too naughty and nobody was gonna stay together if he was still the head guy. So he appointed 5 chiefs, and he formally bopped us on the head with a wand or something and told us we were chiefs. And so 3 of the chiefs, 3 of the 5, split from the other 2. And the other 2 were me and my teacher, who wasn't a terrible guy, except for the fact that he was still, for some reason, being loyal to the a-hole, you know what I mean? So eventually he left the a-hole, and I was like, good, oh, that's good. And then we went and saw the Dalai Lama, and it's like, oh, I like the direction this is going. And then he was like, yeah, you remember that woman who was a nun? She's coming back and joining, so we're going to have Sunday compulsory meetings again, and you have to be there every Sunday. And I was like, oh, that's a shame, because there's no way in hell I'm going to do that, And he was like, well, then what are we going to do? And I was like, well, I don't know, should I leave the order? And he was like, well, do you think that you want to do that as your path to God? I'm like, yes. Are you fucking serious? And it was deep enough, so we did like a formal, like there were speeches and clapping and stuff. It was the most graceful exit I have ever seen or heard of any adept in the history of any Golden Dawn order. I swear to God. It was, I took off my premonstrator's robe and I gave it to Todd, and then he wore it, and it was just really nice. And I left and I never went back. And it was clean. It was a clean cut. And but I figured that since I like the 3 that left, And like the one that I had just parted with, I was one of the five, right? So as chief adept of my order of one, I have given myself permission to share all these things with the world, and it started when the schism happened. I started having fraters and sorors come to my house from both sides of the schism, and but they hated each other so much that nobody came because the other people were going to be there. So I started inviting the public and just friends, and so then that was when I started kind of being, people were like, well, if you're going to do this, then you really ought to follow the rules, And after I had formally left and everything and given the robe and everything, I started having classes again after a few months. And then I got a formal letter from the Temple of Isis, like, well, if you're going to have classes, you got to follow the rules. And I wrote back and I said, oh, just to be clear, me and my sanctuary are not affiliated with you, have a nice day, And then I started the Esoterinerd podcast. And so that was basically that. So I've just claimed the authority to do so. But when people compare me to Crowley, I mean, I don't hate Crowley like I was programmed to as a child, but it's not actually factually correct because he was never made a chief adept. He never had the authority to reveal those things, whereas I was by someone who wasn't.
Yeah. And so
our dress-up game.
I was trying to figure out how Edward had a rationale for doing this ritual online, and I was like,
I gave you permission.
And I said, how do you justify doing this with the vow and stuff? And he pointed out that there was a clause in our order's version of the vow that unless you couldn't do anything basically without permission of a chief of the second order. And he was like,
you can break any of the things.
He was like, but if you are a chief of the second order, you can give yourself permission. That's why that clause was put in. And this actually does, and I found out very recently, Edward, that this goes back actually a very long ways, back to the original order. Like that is how they saw it. And because someone has to actually, otherwise you can't get new members and you can't tell anyone what you're doing if you don't have some dispensation. And in our order, it was through this clause in the vow.
What do you do if there's an apostasy? You need Joseph, to hear Moroni.
Yeah, right. So, and it's similar, it's parallel to the way in which Pat Zaleski and the other modern heads of the Golden Dawn were initiated by the Whare Ra group, the last remaining Golden Dawn temple in New Zealand, where they altered the vows for them so that they would be able to share and teach and publish all the material that we all can buy in stores today. And that's why the Golden Dawn tradition is alive and well, is because of those sort of dispensations. A lot of people, of course, don't care about any of that stuff at all, but I thought it would be an interesting point of sort of history and procedure as to how this came about. And when he pointed that out, I was like, oh, well, this is interesting. And after a couple of years of prodding and being on his podcast and deep soul searching and talking with my own higher genius, I have done what I've done the last 5 years. So it's thank you very much, Edward, for bringing my own sense of ownership and personal responsibility back into an active role in my life, so that the magic could be a part of my life again in a way that actually brought abundance. And I appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for saying all that.
So thank you very, very much for being with us and giving us a look at the U1 and the Tree of Life and then all your work. It's just great. Everything you're doing is fucking awesome. And I hope you keep riding out this new world that we find ourselves in, and I hope your wife is well, and keep sharing your adventures. I know you might be on a podcast of one of us here soon.
Good. Well, I just noticed the chat for the first time.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's always a demon. Yes, established. Okay, sorry.
That was a great line, brother. And there's always a demon.
Yeah. No, it's great. I recommend episode 77 of Esoterinerd, even though it doesn't seem interesting from the outside.
And what's the episode with the band for Hermetic or the Golden Dawn who played at CBGB's where they're like, Woodman and when Westcott built a temple?
Episode 23 with Brian Dahl, BRYINDALL.
An amazing episode just for cultural history, honestly. You knocked that one out of the park.
I was so happy to interview him.
Thank you so much for spending so much time with us, and this is just such a treat. You're much braver than me wearing your lamen on the outside. When we all do ritual work, I wear mine on the inside because I'm not quite as brave as you. That's not actually the reason, of course.
I think I remember the day that I decided, it was the same day that I took down my curtains so my neighbors could see me too. It was a little interesting, a psychological thing to go through, Yeah, it was interesting.
I think your role in the occulture and its development in our time point in history, brother, will be noted in the future, shall we say.
Well,
I
thank
think,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, look out for the Esoterinerd book next year. I'm writing, that's all I'll say about that. When my dad and I would meditate when I was young, we would close the meditation in a particular way. And, we can close it that way.
Let's do it.
Optional to close your eyes. It's up to you. To the north and to the south, to the east and to the west, to the spirits of light among us, and to the spirits below, we send out our reverent love and compassion. May all beings be happy. May all beings be serene. May all beings be in peace.
Thank you, very honored Frater RC. And thank you to everyone who attended. The U1 inspiration, imagination, and creativity lecture that I gave yesterday, I think. Special thanks to Susumu Ueda and his father and the other monks at Jofuku-in on Mount Koyasan in Japan for the music you're hearing right now, which is actually the same track that was playing at the beginning of every episode of the Esoterinerd podcast. So, thank you. Really, thank you. It's so good. A special thanks to Camille and Kennerly for the harp music leading into and out of the lecture, in this case, today. And most importantly, thank you to you, the Esoterinerd, listening to this podcast or watching this podcast right now. Go forth in love, truth, and knowledge. There was an episode, I don't know which episode it was, but I said I was gonna, it was the first of the two-parter with RC a few episodes back, and I said I was gonna play Brian Dahl's opening by Watchtower, and then I played Brian Dahl's Invocation of the Bornless one. What kind of dunce-ass occultist stuff is that? That's like a rookie mistake. I need to proofread more. Or proof listen in this case. So today, to make up for that, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to close with Brian Dahl performing the opening by Watchtower. Good night.